This is the Fire Dog Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson. I'm here with Ben Perry, and thank you for joining us for episode 14 of the Fire Dog Podcast. Our guest today has been in the Air Force for 36 years. He served at multiple locations throughout the world and is currently serving as Fire Chief at Ramstein Air Base in Germany. He was also recently inducted into the Military Firefighter Heritage Hall of Fame. Please welcome Chief John Thompson. Hey, Chief. How's it going?
How are you?
Good. Great to have you on. Thanks for coming on. Look forward to talking to you today.
Happy to be here.
So many of us know you, or at least many of us have heard of you. But for those of you who have not heard of you, can you tell us who you are? Tell us how long you've been in the Air Force Fire Service and what bases you've been at?
Sure. So, I came in 83. Back then, tech school was 6 weeks. So I graduated from lovely Chanute Air Force Base and headed off to Zweibrücken Air Base, Germany in October of 83 and stayed there for 3 years. Then went back to Chanute Base Department. That's where I met Chief Donan and several others that would be influential in my life. And left Chanute Base Department in 89, May of 89. Headed to Iraklion Air Station, Crete, Greece. Criminal assignment. Just terrible on the med and all that stuff. So we were there 89 to 93, and then headed to Andersen for the first time as a young know-nothing tech sergeant, and was at Andersen from 93 to 96, and then headed to Kadena, and was there from March of 96 till August of 2000, and then took my only remote assignment to Clear Air Force Station, Alaska. Giant fire department. I think there was 24 of us there. And then I had a follow-on to Nellis, and that got to Nellis in late 2001, just after 9/11, and spent most of 2002 deployed or TDY or something to that effect, and then landed in Al-Udeid Air Base in December of 2002 when it was all tent city, and stayed there during the war. Left in July of 03, put my retirement paperwork in from the desert. Didn't even know you could do that. Came back to Nellis and got hired on as AC of Health and Safety, but was only in that job for a month or so. And then got moved over to training. And then about a year later, a little longer than a year, I was sniffing around and I took the chief's job at Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Michigan. And we got there in February 05. And then left there and went to Guam, Andersen again in June of 2006 and stayed there till May of 2015. Headed back to Nellis in May of 2015 and then arrived here at Ramstein in January 2019. So 36 years.
A lot of places.
Yeah, a lot of repeats too.
Yeah, so I noticed Guam was on there twice, Andersen. Was there a particular place that you liked more than the others?
Yes. I don't think I had a bad assignment, but Kadena by far was my favorite assignment. Japanese people are awesome. And man, stuff burned there the time I was there. Car fires, house fires, unattended cooking fires, plane crashes, it was a sexy place to be a firefighter.
Was that because there were more than just Air Force? There were Army and Marine Corps? I'm not sure familiar with Kadena, but
no, I mean the Marines are on base, but Kadena is Kadena. It's mainly Air Force, but the Marines had a couple of the crashes and things like that. But no, I just think it was that time. I think that the military, we didn't make as much money as we did today as we did back then. So a lot of people had used cars there. A lot of people cooked at home, and I just think it was a great time. It was a great time for stuff catching on fire, and you learn stuff in tech school and advanced courses, and then you actually get to put it into play in real life situations.
Selfridge, is that Michigan, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And you took that job because of the opportunity, or what?
Yeah, it was my chief, my mentor at Nellis, Chief Mike Boley. He kept bagging on me. It's like, look, man, you gotta keep trying, keep shooting for the stars, keep going up. And it was I was leery to go out of that comfort zone or whatever, but I called the outgoing chief there, and he said, yeah, he says, we got a BX, a commissary, KC-135s, F-16s, H-860s, base housing. And I'm like, guard base? It's got all that stuff, or whatever. So I was intrigued. And the mistake I've been making as a civilian is I was like, let me put in for something and see what happens. And careful what you apply for.
Was there a noticeable difference with guard and active duty?
Yeah, without a doubt. Now the department itself, all civilian, all GS civilian. So any department like that equates to Union City, and you're gonna learn or you're gonna be crucified, one or the other. And I think I just got in, I got out before they got a chance to stake me up. But I learned a ton there. But yeah, the guard is completely different. I mean, they have a ton of people that are real firefighters in big cities and stuff like that. And then they got people that aren't. So it is a different world than active duty. And it was essentially that's what I felt like. I was coming off active duty, going on into the guard. And it took some getting used to. There's some things I saw there that you don't normally see on an active base, for sure.
Well, Chief, congratulations on your recent selection to the Military Firefighter Heritage Hall of Fame. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I be honest with you, wasn't until the last couple of years ago I didn't know that there was such a thing. And then I got notified earlier this year. And, you just think that, we're all tough and all that stuff. And so the morning I got the notification, I called my wife. I was doing my 24 at the station. And I called my wife and I was reading her the email and my voice cracked. Like I was starting to cry just by telling her. And she's my biggest fan. She's just over the moon with all that stuff. And I was trying to get back to the States right before the COVID lockdown of Europe, and I was kind of focused on other things, but just the hundreds of emails and Facebook messages and stuff like that. So I did some digging and looked up, that the Heritage Foundation's been around since 2001. Mike Robish and those guys down there just do an incredible job and unsung, because most of us don't know about it. But they didn't start doing the Hall of Fame part till like 2013. And if you follow sports at all, like baseball or any of those other sports, the first year the Hall of Fame comes into existence, they got a lot of people that they're pushing in that it's been decades since they had a Hall of Fame. So they inducted 13 that first year, just crazy, incredible names like Lewis F. Garland, things like that, the stuff that, things are just legendary people. So, and then they've inducted one or two people, sometimes three, every year since then. And when you read some of the names in there, frankly, I don't see it. I mean, I love what I do and I get a lot of compliments and all that stuff, but I don't know if I measure up to some of the folks that I read in there.
I wonder what the criteria is for selection. I'm not saying that you're not deserving or anybody else isn't deserving. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I wonder, what kind of criteria? Is it a vote? Do they look at your 36 years?
So that all I don't know a lot about that part. So, but there has to be a write-up. And one of my former deputies, who's now the chief out at Mountain Home, Chance Kruger, did the write-up. So he called me a few months back and he started asking me goofy questions. And I was like, why are you asking this? And he's like, look, I'm submitting you for the Hall of Fame. So you can either cooperate with me and give me the real stuff or I'll make it up type thing. So anyways, but talking with a couple people that sent me some congratulations stuff, that it's a board of peers, a bunch of retired legendary types that get in there and read that stuff. Again, I'm an old baseball guy, so it used to be if you stay around long enough and get 3,000 hits or 500 home runs, you're in, so maybe mine's like 3 bomber crashes in 1 year or something like that. Maybe that's what it takes. I don't know.
And I understand Chief Thompson made it in this year as well.
Yeah, that's correct. So Dave and I met him in December of 1986 when I got to Chanute. Him and I were both base department together, both on B shift. He was ended up being rescue crew chief, and I was the rescue driver until I tore a door off the rescue truck. But so yeah, Dave and I been around a long time, known each other a long time. if you ask me what it takes to get in the Hall of Fame, Dave hits every box. I have to imagine, I mean, they've won Air Force Fire Department of the Year like 6 out of the last 8 years or something like that, or whatever. And he's got such a great staff up there, great programs, and other than his college that he roots for and things like that, he doesn't have a lot of holes in his game.
So I wonder if they're going to invite you guys on to the B board members here when you start voting, now that you're inductees.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I get the impression that it's folks that have been out of the career field for a while, but they're still just an amazing name. So like Chief George Hall contacted me and said that he was normally one of the board members, but had something go on this year medically, I think, or something. So he wasn't on the board this year. So maybe I snuck in that way. I don't know.
Well, Chief, there's so many topics we could talk about with you about, from civilian personnel matters, building your network, or mafia, as you call it. And just so many more experiences from being a military and civilian firefighter for as long as you have. Today, though, let's talk about large-scale emergencies. I understand that you've been a part of a handful of significant emergencies in your time. One of the most significant is the B-1 incident you were part of at Andersen Air Force Base in Guam. Would you like to share the story about that incident, maybe highlight some of the lessons you've been able to pull from that over time?
Yes, and I'll apologize up front. I've given this briefing probably 100 times, but never recorded. Everything has always been with playing the video, which pretty much speaks for itself. It's pretty astounding to watch all the firefighters and maintenance crew and the B-1 crew members run around the bottom of the plane and not get hit. So anyways, I'll give it a shot, and hopefully it's worthy of a listen. So as you said, early March 2008, it was almost 3 weeks to the day after the B-2 had crashed at Andersen. So we were doing a retirement ceremony for one of our GS-8s at Andersen, and IFE came in. So one of those 50-minute ETA things, so they had plenty of time to get out there. So we finished up the retirement thing, and me and my wife were walking Mr. Egan and his wife out to the parking lot. And I had my radio with. We were planning on going to lunch afterwards. And, you could hear the plane land, and you could hear Chief 2 talking, and, you're just, like you do as a firefighter, you're listening and answering questions you hear, in your head. So went back inside, and we were getting ready to head to lunch, and I hear the rescue crew chief say, with a very frantic tone, those tones when you hear the alarm operators say, "Hey, we have reported fire," or whatever. You knew something was going on when he says, "Hey, we need aircraft trucks up here immediately." And you're like, all right. So Senior Master Sergeant Lean was the deputy at the time. He poked his head around the door, and I was like, that doesn't sound good. So right after I said that, then you hear Chief 2 scream, "Get those trucks out of there, get those trucks out of there, move it." And I was just, conjuring up, and I couldn't conjure up something as bad as what had actually happened. So told the wife, yeah, I guess we're not going to lunch. Me and the senior jumped in Chief 1, and off we went. So on the way to the scene, the base civil engineer was coming the other way and saw us go by with my hair on fire. And he says, "Hey, Chief," he says, "is there something I need to know about?" And I was like, "Yeah." I said, "I think the airplane ran into one of the fire trucks." I said, "Chief 2, can you confirm?" And he came back and he said it ran into 2. So, you're just like, all right, great. So you're worried about the health and, did anybody get hurt and all that stuff. So we get out on scene, and, what I like to tell people at AFF and places I give presentations, when you get on scene, you're supposed to have training or experience to help you through, a large scale event. I didn't have a checklist for that anywhere. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So, but I knew I was mad. I knew I was disappointed, and I think I was scared. So I went up to Chief 2, and AC, station captain, and the AC of prevention were standing in a little gaggle right there. The AC of prevention was on the truck. We were trying to get him trained up so he could fill in as the AC, on his 24. So I looked at the AC and I said, look, I really don't want to talk to you guys right now. I said, but in a minute, I'm going to want to know why I got more people on Chief 2 today than I have on rescue. So I walked over, I found the aircraft commander. He was walking around. He was talking on the cell phone. He got done. And I walked up to him and I said, hey, sir. I introduced myself and I said, I apologize. And he said, Chief, what are you apologizing to me for? And I said, look, I said, my guy should have chalked your plane, and this wouldn't happen. And he was like, Chief, this is my plane. He says, I'm responsible for it. He said, I did not shut this down properly. He said, this whole thing's on me. Now, understand that never made it into any official documents. That never made it into anything, so it was just something from him to me. So I walked back over to talk to the group, and by then the CE commander had joined the group. And I walked back over, and again, I don't know what to do, how to act or whatever, and the CE commander was laughing. That didn't sit well with me, so, I basically impolitely asked him what he was laughing about. And he points to the B-2 that was still sitting on the ground, 300 yards away. And he goes, you got the B-2 over there. You got this one here. He said, what else can you do but laugh? So about that time, the wing commander's vehicle pulls up, and he's got the OG commander with him. And he gets out of the car, and I walk over to him, and I tell him again, I said, sir, I said, I apologize. I said, but this one's on us, like on fire. And he's not one of those hair on fire kind of guys, cussing or, anything. He just looked at me and he says, well, how you figure that? And I said, well, we should have chalked the plane, and we did. So he just walked away, and he went up to the aircraft commander and said what he had to say. So now it's BCE, AC station captain, AC prevention, myself. General comes walking up and looks at me in the most sternest of voice and said, I'm going to stand up the EOC again. And then he pointed at me, almost putting his finger in my chest, and said, and you're in charge. So off he goes. So then the CE commander looks at me and he's like, it's not so funny anymore. And I'm like, you think it's not so funny? So anyway, so away he goes. About that time, I hear Cobra 2, which is the vice wing commander, come over the radio. He's like, Chief 1, Cobra 2. He says, can you meet me at building 123? I don't know what building it was. And I've never been to building 123. So all I can assume is that's the building where fire chiefs get fired at. So I hand my portable to the deputy, Senior Lean, and I said, hey, I think I'm about to go get fired. I said, so, you're in charge. You're the fire chief. And his lip was quivering, because he felt like, he was watching me go down and he didn't want me to go down. So I start driving across the runway, and now I hear the wing commander call me on the radio. He's like, Chief 1, Cobra 1, meet me over at Juliet Taxiway or whatever. So I'm like, oh, shit, I'm not even going to get to building 123 before I get fired. I'm going to get fired right here. So I go over to his vehicle, and it's raining outside, so I'm wearing my sexy white shirt. I get out, and it's just poetic to me. I'm standing there in the rain at attention at his window, and he looks at me and he goes, is it written anywhere where firefighters have to chalk aircraft? I'm like, no, sir. And he goes, well, you need to shut the F up with that self-condemnation stuff. He says, you're going to get yourself in trouble. Now, to backtrack slightly, it's written now. It's a JT rule that was inserted after 2008 in the 105B-9, but it wasn't back then. So anyway, so off I go. I'm headed to this building where I still think I'm going to go get fired. And basically, it was just the vice wing commander was telling me that part of the protocol, he was assigned as the interim safety board president, and the crew and anybody that had a significant role in the emergency was going to have to go get a urinalysis at the hospital just to make sure that they weren't hopped up, and that wasn't part of the reason everything going on. So I left there, went to the EOC in the CAT, and all the group commanders were sitting there watching the video of the incident that you can watch on YouTube or Google it or whatever. And they were kind of like giggling a little bit and making light of it. So the station captain, I still don't remember how I got him over there, but the station captain was over there, and I leaned over to him, and I was like, I might survive this after all. And about that time, like the bat phone in front of the MSG commander rings, and he picks it up, and then he looks right at me, and he was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right away. He hangs up the phone, and he's like, Chief, wing commander wants you to see you in his office, and I think I'm going to go with you. So it's like 5:00 in the afternoon on Friday. This happened at like noon, and I'm like, I don't see how this can be good at all. So off we go. He's in his staff car. I'm in my truck, and I call the vice wing commander. We had a pretty good relationship. And I said, hey, the boss is calling me into his office. Any idea what I'm in for? And he's like, I don't know, man. He goes, all I can do is tell the truth and shoot him straight. And he says, good luck, and I'm like, oh, thanks a lot, So head into the wing headquarters building. There's nobody in the building except for the wing commander, 1-star. Go to his office, sit down, and on his left across the table is the MSG commander, and I'm on the right. And the wing commander has this giant picture window on the whole right side of his office, and it's just overlooks the base and mainly the flight line. And he just kept looking out there and then looking at us. And he did this for what seemed like 10 minutes to me, but it was probably like 90 seconds or 2 minutes or something. And you were just like, in your mind, you were just like, say something, what are we doing here, So finally the MSG commander cracked. He couldn't handle it. So he was like, sir, I know I wasn't invited. He says, but it's just a force of habit. I'm here to protect my guys. Wing commander just looks out the window again, looks back, I got like this grapefruit in my throat, that I'm trying to swallow. So finally he looks at the MSG commander and he goes, Mark, I didn't call him up here to pound on him. He said, I got several planes out over the Pacific headed to our base. He lost 2 fire trucks today. I need to know his capabilities. Do I got to turn those planes around or not? So I explained to the general that we had just got a truck back from depot, and we just got a new Striker in, and they were actually still green even with losing the 2 P-23s. So I gave him what he wanted to hear, and basically he told me to skedaddle. So I got up and I got to the threshold of the door, and I'm a little heavier now than I was then, but I was still a big boy. By the time I got to the threshold of the door, I ran out of the office just because I didn't want him to say, oh, by the way, you're fired kind of thing, or something like that. So I thought I escaped all that stuff. And but what do you do? I mean, I don't know if you guys ever heard anything like that before, but I had never heard of that. So Friday night, I spent the night in the fire station. I didn't sleep a wink. I just kind of looked at the ceiling and, wondered if I need to learn how to be a truck driver or what was going to happen, So Saturday was normally golf day, but I just went home and I think I was in shock. I just sat at home and just really didn't do anything. And about 6:00, I heard over the radio that they had a crane out at the scene, and they were going to lift the B-1 up enough to drive the 1 P-23 out from underneath it. That basically chalked the plane, so to speak. So I drove to work, got in Chief 1, and I went out there to check it out. And when I got there, wing commander, vice wing commander were both there. And they came right over to me, and the wing commander says, he says, John, he says, I want to tell you, he says, I just got off the phone with General Utterback. Now, General Utterback is the 3-star 13th Air Force commander at the time. So when you go back 3 weeks to the B-2, General Utterback and the 4-star, the PACAF commander, that B-2 crash happened on a Saturday. They flew in on a Sunday to just to witness it on their way to Kadena. And so there was like 50 of us lined up on the flight line at the crash site, and the 4-star and the 3-star came through. Well, the 3-star and our 1-star were golfing buddies. So I had driven from the golf course when the B-2 crashed in a golf cart to the fire station, and then got in Chief 1 and responded out there. So when the 3-star went through the line, he shook my hand, but then he pulled me in and he was like, Chief, he says, that golf cart story, that's things legends are made of. So, I felt like I was, Billy Badass or whatever, I got a big chip in my pocket and I was a cool dude, but that lasted 3 weeks. So circle back to the phone call from the general's telling me, he says, look, I just got a phone from General Utterback and he wants you to know that he likes you and he likes what you're doing down here and you're going to be okay. And I can't get it across in words to your listeners, what a relief it was to hear that, because I really thought I was going down with the ship. I really did. So it was crazy stuff. So,
Chief, I wonder why did you accept responsibility so quick? Was it you were kind of in shock and we're responsible for these aircraft and for the response and the emergency response of it? Is that why you kind of walked on scene and said, hey, without even knowing, I guess, the entire story, that's why you kind of raised your hand and said, I take responsibility?
Yeah, I think that, as firefighters, we look at our side and, from the time we heard the assistant chief yell on the radio until I got on scene 3, 4, 5 minutes, whatever that was, you're going over that with your deputy and you're using all your experience and you're trying to wonder what goes on and how could we have avoided it? And obviously we could have avoided it if we would have chalked the plane. Now there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different other things that could have happened that could have prevented it too. So the runway that I crossed was closed because of the B-2 crash. There was a maintenance crew that had got on scene like 3 or 4 minutes before the fire trucks did. They were sitting at that runway waiting for permission to cross, not knowing that it was treated like a taxiway and they didn't need to ask permission, or else they would have been over there and chalked it to begin with. The pilot, the chief that I replaced at Andersen was a guy named Ralph Barone. In late 2005, they had a B-1 incident where hydraulic failure, IFE, the plane pulled off onto a taxiway, one taxiway away from where this one happened, and the hydraulic fluid was leaking onto the hot brakes and caught on fire and exploded. And it was well known throughout the B-1 community. So I think that incident played a role in our incident, because I think the pilot was afraid, because there was a huge amount of hydraulic fluid leaking out of his plane. So I think he was afraid that was going to happen to his plane. So he just wanted to get out of there and get his crew out of there, and so they shut down. So again, is it a blame? Is it us 100%? No, but I don't know. Maybe that's just my personality. So I don't know, Matt.
Well, I think you probably that probably played a hand in you not being fired. Not to say that you were going to get fired, but I think that ownership, that level of ownership, just right off the bat, like, hey, sir, we take this one to the chest. If I lose my job, I lose my job. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. I don't know. That just from an outsider's perspective,
Right.
hearing the story could have helped you out.
Right. And it could, there's hundreds of things at play. So it could have very well have helped me out. I don't know. I always say though, when I give the brief that, I feel like if the B-1 would have happened before the B-2, in my mind, I'm not sure that I survived.
Chief, how did the 2 incidents within just a couple weeks of each other weigh on the department? The floor firefighters all the way up through the senior leaders.
Well, just knowing that, if you've ever been at a place, we are so strange, firefighters. So a fire is a cool thing, a crash with no fatalities, that is cool. We get to go do our job. So the B-2 guys, everybody involved in that. I mean, there was 47 achievement medals handed out. We didn't get to save, the pilots, they ejected. But what those guys did that day, inadvertently saved the black box, which got the fleet from being grounded so that we could go on protecting our country and doing what we do. So you go from that extreme of, we're awesome, we're firefighters, we're sexy. And then you go to, anybody being involved in that. If someone will admit that they were on duty that day, they're going to have to be liquored up, or they're going to be whispering or something like that, So it's just one of those things where So it was a huge shift in how they felt.
And nobody was injured during either response, I assume.
Well, so the B-2, we did have one GS-8 stepped off of the first arriving crash truck, and he blew his knee out. But that was the only injury of the two. The B-2, I mean, we could have, when I look back at that in history, I mean, when you look at planes, majority of planes, when they crash, they ain't flying again. But sometimes we don't think about that, so when you think about risk a lot to save a lot, sometimes you just get tunnel visioned into fire, must put out fire, type thing. And some of the pictures that we were allowed to see of that thing, I had 8 guys right up, kissing the wing, and it was never going to fly again, so it was scaring me that it burned for 6.5 hours. And I thought, that this just shouldn't happen. I've never heard of this happening. So, we got to do everything we can to put it out. But in the end, we weren't really saving anything except for a little bit of evidence,
Mm-hmm. Chief, in addition to the chalking policy that you said you implemented following the B-1 incident, were there any other policy changes as a result of either the B-1 or the B-2?
So one of the things that came out of the B-1, the basically the situation that happened is you had 4 crash trucks set up, 2 rescue, 2 off rescue, and for whatever reason, the off rescue guys got out of the way. The rescue side guys didn't get out of the way. Part of what I believe happened is, if you ever get to see the video, the guys, the visually from off rescue side looking at the plane, they had the jungle in the background as a backdrop. So when the plane started to move ultra slowly and roll, you could see that contrast and see that it was moving. The guys on the rescue side just had the blue sky as a backdrop, and I don't think they had the time. And by the time they figured out it was moving, I think I read in the report that B-1 weighs like 166,000 pounds. You had time to pucker and run, basically, is really all they could do. So they were all out of their trucks. They were looking for chalks based off of the request from the rescue crew chief and at least the rescue side guys. And they looked up, saw the plane coming, and they just got out of the way, almost in the nick of time.
Chief, you mentioned at the beginning of the story a bit about your rescue truck maybe being a little bit understaffed. Would you mind expanding on that and then maybe talking about other lessons learned that have come out of that incident?
Sure. So for those of us who've been around a couple of days, they know that in that time frame, there was a manning reduction across the Air Force Fire Protection called PBD 720. I want to say that the Air Force Fire had to give up 900 or so positions, and PACAF's bill to pay for that was 13 firefighters per base, basically. So I think Andersen went from like 82 to 69 firefighters, give or take. So we were trying to man 3 fire stations at the time with 13 firefighters on duty. And that was extremely difficult. I mean, you do all the geometry you want, but there's only so many ways to split it. So, we came up with either making like a rescue crew on a crash truck or a 2-man rescue crew. And I think both could be or would be effective. But the lesson learned is not training before we did that. Sometimes, at least for me, I don't know how it is for other folks, but you get enamored by the 5th bugle and knowing that you get to do whatever the hell it is you want to do. You're the boss. So I was kind of mad, that I had to give up 13 bodies. And so I just, came in after the holidays and said, bang, this is what we're going to do. We're going to shoot from the hip, and we're just going to go to a 2-man rescue crew. But we're not going to train on it. So, and it wasn't a conscious decision. I just wasn't smart enough to know that it was such a big muscle movement that I should have trained on it before I implemented it. During the B-2, it didn't hurt us. But when I got out on scene, I asked the incident commander about the crew. And I got a vague answer that I didn't like. And essentially what happened was all the crash crews went straight to the plane. their 20,000 gallon pit fire going on. They're going to go to the plane. The ambulance crew that was working out of the fire department, they went to where the pilots were, and I ended up going over there and actually helping to carry the pilot out myself. So anyways, it just is either way you were going to handle it. The lesson learned is anytime you have a major departure from the standard procedure, you have to train it, because realistically, you guys may not be old enough to understand or remember, but rescue crew, 3-man rescue crew, if you ask somebody who chalks the plane, it's the backseater. So if you don't have a backseater, the plane's not going to get chalked unless you have trained, with the driver or the crew chief, chalking it or whatever. So that was something we definitely screwed up.
Chief, after it was all said and done, I imagine there was an investigation into one or both of the incidents that happened. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so investigations, 2 types: safety investigation board, which is one they're going to do every time there's a Class A incident, that will do a safety investigation board. And then if it's bad enough, then they will do what's called an AIB, or an accident investigation board. And that is supposed to be to answer a groundswell of public information requests. And it also is to assign blame. So in this case, originally, they weren't planning on doing an AIB. They were just going to do the SIB. And 3-4 weeks after our incident, there was an incident you may or may not have heard of at Al Udeid Air Base, where a B-1 landed, hydraulic failure, rolled into a 6-foot tall Jersey barrier, exploded. Crew got out through the top, and during the fire that ensued, 12 to 15 live bombs detonated and blew the plane apart and damaged a couple of other aircraft in the area. So the planes were both from the same squadron at Ellsworth, and the ACC commander decided that he wanted to do a joint AIB for that. So if you go back to the SIB, Safety Investigation Board, typically firefighters are not going to be involved in any safety investigation board unless it has some fire flavor to it. So there was fire flavor to the B-1. And then I found out through the grapevine that the sitting fire chief, the fire chief at Seymour Johnson, was coming to be part of the SIB team at Andersen. So if you understand the investigation world, that should pucker you up, that when a sitting fire chief is going to come and dig through your stuff. So they got on scene, and he knows what to look for. He went through driver's training records. He went through training records. He did some interviews, and he just uncovered some stuff that I was asleep at the wheel on. So AFTO cards, there was too many blank signatures, so it just gives the impression that we're not checking our stuff out. The other piece was, some of the testimony was that the kids that were in the truck said they put it in reverse to try and get out of the way, and the truck wouldn't move. So he asked other drivers in the station, and he basically got the thing that, oh yeah, that happens all the times with the P-23s. So he's like, well, what do you do? He says, well, normally we just shift back into neutral and then back into reverse, and then usually it goes in, the second time. So it was news to me, but I just think that all the kids I was getting in at Andersen, it was normal to them. So they never wrote it up. They never did anything. So Chief Wade did I think he did like 25 reverse, did the thing 25 times, and 25% of the time on each truck, it went into reverse. You could hear the backup signal and you could see the lights, but it never actually went into reverse. So it was just a systematic issue with the truck, that had to be looked at.
Were those issues just there with the trucks there at Guam, or did they find it to be enterprise-wide?
I don't know enterprise-wide, but I P-23 is not regarded as the best truck that we've ever had. So
sure.
But I do know that it happened at other places. I just don't know that it at the same thing across the board.
Chief, can you tell us how long the aircraft was out after the incident?
Yeah, they sent a depot team in, so most fire departments probably don't know what a depot team is, but they sent a depot team in, series of mechanics into Andersen, and they were TDY there for, I think, over a year. And they actually reached out to Davis Monthan, got some donor wings and a couple other things, and did some repairs. And then they flew the plane back to Ellsworth sometime in 2009. So it was out for a minute, that's for sure.
So the plane did fly again.
It did. Well, and then the other story, the one that Chief Barone had back in late 2008, that one had significant fire damage. And from what I understand, Air Force wanted to send it to DM, and Congress overrode them and made them fix it. So that one sat at Andersen for, I think, 3 years while the depot team did their stuff. So I don't know how excited I would be to be that guy that gets to fly the thing back, over the pond, or whatever. So, but, so anyways, yeah, it was a bad year at Andersen for bombers, that's for sure. But we had the B-2 crash in February, the B-1 in March. We had a team deployed to IUD when the one blew up in April. And then tragically, we had a B-52 crash for Liberation Day in July. It was going to do a flyover of the parade on Guam, and never made it to the parade scene. It crashed out in the ocean, and 5 aviators perished, including Colonel Martin, our flight surgeon at Andersen. So Ohio State guy, great dude. So crashes are one thing. I've been lucky, but when there's fatalities involved, it just ramps things up, tenfold.
So, Chief, I understand that you and your cohorts are known as the disaster crew.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's I like talking about that. So that came up 2016. The chief up at Fairchild, nobody knows how to say his last name, so Chief Chemo, everybody calls him. So Chief Chemo, they were going to have an air show that summer in 2016, and they had an awesome MSG commander, female 06 CE type, and her name escapes me right now. But she reached out to Chemo and said, "Hey, man, why don't you bring in some fire chief types that have had some major incidents, and they could come in and brief our EOC and our senior leadership and make sure that we're ready for the air show." And I thought it was a great idea. So thinking about crashes and stuff like that, I guess my name comes to mind fairly quickly. So he got a hold of me. I think she had a relationship. The MSG commander had known Chief Giuliano. So originally it was going to be Chief Giuliano, myself. And then I turned him on to Chief Donan, and he was going to brief the C-17 from 2010 and the air show up there. And at the last minute, they shifted it a week, and Chief Giuliano couldn't come in. So I was talking to Chief Smith out at Beale, and he was like, "Man, I'd love to come up there for that. I could talk about my U-2 crash that we had last year." So we were just going up there, and we got formed basically because of that. And then we started texting just so we could say, "Hey, we're going to this hotel," or "We land at this time," or whatever. And that group text has gone on since 2016. And we talk every day. Chemo tells me how bad Ohio State is. And, we tease each other. We talk about work. We talk about life. We talk about everything. But it's just been an awesome thing for me, and I encourage everybody to tap into the resources of your bros from other bases and stuff like that, and use that stuff. So I mean, when something comes up at Ramstein or whatever, just yesterday I sent them an email, and I was like, "Hey, you guys got this?" And they're all like, "Yep, I got it." So it's hard to stump that group. We think we're cool. We're probably not as cool as we think we are, but anyway, so it's been a great thing for me.
Chief, I know you talked about the video a little bit in the beginning. Where can people find that video?
So I think you just Google search it or YouTube it. It's on YouTube, and you don't get the cool spliced one with the radio traffic. It's just a tower video that was shot on top of the tower, like mechanical thing. And but it shows everything exactly, and you can see the firefighters running around. You can see the maintainers coming out, the crew members coming from underneath the plane. And as I read the report, I don't remember how many people were on there, but a couple of them got to that ladder that looks down on the bottom of the plane and saw the ground moving so fast. They were like, "Nuh-uh, I am not getting off this plane. I'm afraid I'm gonna get run over or whatever." So it's a miracle that no one got hurt or killed. A lot of taxpayer dollars went down that day, but no lives and stuff like that. But I always think to myself, we were talking about earlier about how I survived or why I survived. I think part of it, I'm a big into fate, and I think I survived to do stuff like this. To tell you guys, what works and what doesn't work, and so you guys don't experience the same career pitfalls that I experienced, and don't chalk any more planes with trucks.
All right, Chief. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to come on and talk with us. And thanks so much for being transparent and putting yourself out there and putting, I don't want to call them mistakes, but just your experiences out there and some lessons learned. And I know that's going to help. I know that's going to help our listeners. I know that's going to help me. Really appreciate you being humble and willing to do that. So do you have anything else that you'd like to share before we finish up?
Ben and Matt, thanks. I think it's a great opportunity to talk to hopefully hundreds of my counterparts out there or whatever. And one more thought that comes into this, hopefully I'll get to this in the next segment or whatever, but being fire chief is cool and being assistant chief is cool. And I think everybody, gets enamored by the bugles and all that stuff, but understand that the buck stops with you, and it's not all peaches and cream. And just like with the B-1, essentially what happened that day was Chief 2 said, dispatch, aircraft is fire safe. Please give me alert photographer and call Chief 1. So what he's saying in a nutshell is call the guy that's responsible for everything that just happened that wasn't on scene to the scene. Now, I wasn't on scene, but the guy that was sitting in Chief 2, how'd he get there? I put him there. And I had a couple people a couple fire chiefs and a couple of senior fire officers told me not to put him there. But I'm stubborn, and I felt like some of his weaknesses were my strengths. I could OJT him up, but what I couldn't see through, forest through the trees kind of thing is you can't be everywhere all the time. And whoever you put in that seat, a Chief 2, they are you. They are the fire chief. So they're responsible for the base and the lives and the planes, but they're also responsible for your job. So don't just hire your bro. Don't just hire somebody that you owe a favor. They either got the goods or they don't got the goods. And boy, I learned that the hard way. And as I talked to you guys before I came on the air, almost every difficult decision that I make, from 2008 till now, that B-1 incident has played a part in me thinking about it. So I'm leery. I'm leery about going down that road again. But you can rest assured that I ain't making the same mistake twice.
Chief, that's what it's all about, is telling stories. I think that's an important part of what we're doing here, is bringing these stories to maybe an audience who hasn't heard it before. So again, we appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Fire Dog Podcast. You can find more content just like this regularly posted to our Facebook page, facebook.com/the Fire Dog Podcast. That's facebook.com/the Fire DAWG Podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share these podcasts with your friends and coworkers. This is host Matt Wilson with co-host Ben Perry and Chief John Thompson. Until next time, stay safe.